Hello, and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber of commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. And today I am in Hood River, and I have the pleasure of talking with Sara Duckwall and Ed Weathers of Duckwall Fruit, which is located here in the heart of the Hood River Valley, and where it packs and ships over 2 million cartons of premium pears every year. I don't even know how to fathom the volume of that, but we'll get into that with Ed and Sara here in a little bit. And if you've ever driven the famous Hood River Fruit Loop, you have driven right by Duckwall's Odell facility. The company was formed more than 100 years ago, and it is still family-owned and family-operated, and we are certainly proud as Oregonians to have Duckwall as part of the Oregon business community. Ed Weathers is the company's president and sales manager, and Sara Duckwall is the company's project and communications director. Full disclosure, Sara is also on my board of directors, so I'll be extra nice to her in this interview. But Sara and Ed, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So to start, let's just do kind of the obvious openers. Why don't you tell me and the listeners a little bit about Duckwall Fruit? When was the company formed? You know, the high level, where you located, what you do, and then also a little bit about your roles at the company. Sara, let's start with you.
Thank you, Angela. Duckwall Fruit, as you said, was formed in 1919, and we are located in the heart of Hood River Valley in Odell. What I do here at Duckwall Fruit is I'm the project and communications director, so I handle all the communications and special projects as they come up and implementation through inception to the completion. I help with advocacy work for our growers, and I help ensure that everyone is seen and heard here at Duckwall Fruit. Ed, you want to talk about what you do?
Sure. Do a little bit of everything here at Duckwall. I started in the mid-'90s, kind of following in the footsteps of my grandfather, who was the second president of the company, Dick Duckwall, and always had kind of a drive to go in sales and kind of be like Grandpa. I admired his passion for it. So that's really how I got started in the company, and over the years became more involved and was asked to lead about 350 wonderful employees. I've kept my role in the sales department, but branched out and like I say, had the pleasure of leading this great group of people.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, I know Duckwall it literally is a family name for you all, and it feels like a family name that those of us from Oregon are know and are comfortable with, and so thank you for what you do here for the community, for the growers, for your employees. But let's backtrack a little to some of the basics, if you don't mind. I think everyone's probably familiar with pears, and many people know that Oregon grows a lot of them.
In fact, is the Oregon state fruit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I suspect, though, that many people know little about actually the business of pears, so how they're grown, stored, distributed. So before we get more into the company, can you just give us a high-level overview of sort of the pear ecosystem, if you will?
Sure, happy to do that. So pears are grown only in any commercial form in 3 states in the United States, and that's California, Oregon, and Washington. And the majority of those pears are broken up into 2 types. They're called a summer pear and a winter pear, and they're just that. The summer pears come on in the summer, have a shorter life, and the winter pears are held much longer throughout the season. And the winter pears are only grown in Oregon and Washington in any volume. And Oregon grows about half of the winter pears grown in the United States, and about 40% of the total summer pears grown in the United States. And Duckwall Fruit represents about 1/3 of Oregon's total production and about 15% of the industry's total production. We work with growers. They deliver their crops to us in the fall. Then from that point on, we take over and we do the storing, the packing, and the selling, all of those activities, and then return the proceeds to the growers throughout the season and a final pool closing at the end. So that's really high level, but I could dive deeper if there's any interest. Could probably talk for hours.
Well, I love it. What is a kind of annualized calendar for you and your industry? I mean, what is peak season? What is harvest? When it like how does that flow?
Well, harvest really hasn't changed over the years. I mean, the pears are ready when the pears are ready. They generally, we start with the summer varieties anywhere between early and mid-August, and we're wrapped up with selling and shipping right around the first of the year. And then the winter pears harvest about 3 weeks later, so around the first part of September, and those we go almost year-round. So in fact, just yesterday we did our last packing of last year's crop and on winter pears, and we're 3 weeks from the new harvest. So what used to feel like a seasonal crop has really turned into nearly a year-long endeavor.
Yeah, it is. I think people, as a consumer, I know of pears as just year-round being there on the shelf in the store, the counter in the store, but it really is remarkable to think about what goes into getting something from a tree, which I think I read in some of the materials that pear trees could be productive for 100 years, maybe more. I don't know. I guess Duckwall's been around about that long, so we'll find out.
Well, I wasn't around with the planting of those 100-year-old trees.
Okay, well, thank you for the clarification.
That is true. There aren't a lot of those pears around, but just to give you an idea of just how long it takes to get into the business, the old adage is that you plant pears for your heirs. So you may plant a pear that doesn't even produce any fruit for 3 to 5 years and isn't in full production for 12 to 15 years and is really productive well past that. So there are trees in this valley that may not be 100 but could be very close.
Yeah, wow. And then you've mentioned growers, and so can you talk a little bit more about the relationship that you have with the pipeline, if you will? So growers, but also consumers. Where are they, and how do you get pears to them?
We work with an order of 35 to 40 growers on an annual basis. That number is kind of changing as there's been consolidation. That could be a whole nother conversation about the economics of growing, but there are certainly fewer growers in this valley than there were when I started 30 some years ago. But we work with those growers. And then, as I said, we handle the storage, packing, and selling. Our major market is the U.S. market, and we ship about 75% of our crops to the U.S. market. And by the U.S. market, it could be anyone from a small retailer to a national chain that everybody would be familiar with, a Costco, a Walmart, an Aldi, Albertsons, that sort of thing. But we are very much a international sales company, and about 25% of our crop goes across borders or across oceans. That's changed a lot over the years. When I first started, our primary markets were in Europe. Even sold the industry's third largest customer less than 20 years ago was Russia, of all places. Now it's very much centralized in North, Central, and South America. Largest markets are Mexico and then all of the Central American markets. But we ship as far as the Middle East and, places you'd never think of, like New Zealand and Fiji and Brazil, really all over the world. So almost nowhere that a pear can't go. We do our best to get those Oregon pears all over the world for people to enjoy.
I wanna come back a little bit to some of the changes in the industry over time. You alluded to a couple of those in that discussion, but you were talking about exports. 25% is a significant share of your business that is exported. So it's hard for me to get through this interview at this moment in time without asking I assume, I'm going to go out on a really big limb here and assume that shifts in trade policy can cause issues for you all to work through. And so how have recent changes or threatened changes in tariffs affected you and your growers?
Well, I must say that the last 6 months have been a little tense. The unknown is always a little scary, and as you mentioned, a quarter of our crop going overseas. That certainly has been a concern. Given the regions that I talked about, we're fortunate in that our government, as well as Canada and Mexico and Central America, are abiding by the USMCA that was signed in 2017, I believe, which exempts specialty crops, which we fit into, and food. So we currently do not have any additional tariffs on our crops. Now, could there be, potential retaliatory tariffs? That's always a concern. I'll just name one market in particular. As soon as the tariffs were announced, Canada in particular had a very strong, buy Canadian first sentiment, whether that's just initial reaction or not, and how that affects, what people buy and when is yet to be seen. But there are no actual tariffs on our pears currently. But back in the day, I mentioned Russia, for instance, when NATO imposed tariffs on Russia, I believe in 2014, we instantly lost that market. And the ripple effect was that we actually shipped a lot to Europe at that time, and they do not ship to Russia as well. So basically, the window that we had into Europe closed because their own products stayed for a longer period of time in that market. So that one action affected yet another market. So, when people say it's a small world, it really is a small world.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we do tend to think of the direct implications. So like you said, your relationship with the Russian market when the sanctions went into effect. But then there is also the indirect through the ripple effects of other countries' relationships with them.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And we try to remind people a lot in the work that we do that companies are really, every business is in the business of solving problems for customers, for clients, for vendors, and it's hard to predict some of the problems. It's hard to find the solutions to some of the problems. So you kind of have to manage your way through them. And that's a good example of when I think most policymakers or consumers wouldn't have put that on a list of brainstorms of things you'd have to consider. But you're doing that every day. Okay, just a little more kind of in the related space here. How has technology changed what you do over time?
Well, that's another one we could spend a lot more time than you have to talk about. But industry change, industry requirements, as well as labor constraints have really changed over time. The ability to automate has really, and the technology has really exploded in the last 10 years. And, we're now sorting pears optically when it used to be just a very subjective job that an individual sorter would look at, and we would give them a criteria to grade a pear into a certain grade or box. And now it's very objective because we have cameras with limits, and that's really helped. But that has also helped with a shrinking labor force. There are parts of our business that are very seasonal, and the seasonality for certain jobs was becoming impossible to fill those positions. So technology has, in that instance, has helped us through. And then the proliferation in packaging in particular, more of the grab and go type lifestyle that we live in now, where 30 or 40 years ago, you could only think of going in and touching and feeling every apple and pear and grapefruit. And bag salad's the perfect example. Everybody bought a head of lettuce and made their own salad. Now you're buying a bag. So same thing in pears. So we've been able to automate that process as well, which has helped. And we've implemented that technology over the last few years, and a lot of other automation and technology in the warehouse to be as efficient as possible. So technology has changed a lot especially in the last 10 years, and how we operate daily.
I think that's a statement most businesses would make in some way, shape, or form. Sara, I wanna switch to you for a second. We touched on tariffs and sanctions and those federal or international issues, but I want to talk about another one for a second that is often, frankly, difficult to talk about, but one that's so important to Oregon's economy, particularly its agricultural economy, which is immigration. So even before current events, immigration was top of mind for you and your growers. And so can you talk a little about how your company thinks about that issue, the key issues you face, and some of the improvements maybe that federal lawmakers should lean into?
Thanks, Angela. Yeah. The ag industry truly does have the best workforce in the world. Maybe biased, but it's true. But we are an aging workforce, and there aren't many jumping up and down with their hands raised to either pick tree fruits or help pack them. It is truly hard work, and this is an issue. We're still a labor-intensive industry. Ed alluded to some of the technological advancements that help with that, but that's not solving our problem. We still have labor needs that aren't being met. Growers and packing houses are leaning into federal guest worker programs like H-2A and H-2B to fill those gaps where the domestic workforce is not there.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about those two programs?
Yeah, the H-2A program specifically is what growers are able to use, and it's a foreign labor program that they use to harvest their crops, and it's intentionally designed to be costly and difficult to use so that growers will not use the program to displace U.S. workers. But the fallacy is that there's U.S. workers to displace. So growers really truly only turn to this program out of necessity, as it comes with many arduous requirements and to pay a wage rate that's called the adverse effect wage rate, which is currently $19.82 per hour. And to put into perspective, that's over 30% higher than the minimum wage currently in Hood River.
Yeah, that's. I think that statistic or that number would surprise most people. I don't think people know that that's a. I think they have maybe the opposite presumption in their mind about those wages.
Correct. Yeah, the federal lawmakers are not making it easy in any way, shape, or form for to get adequate labor to pick crops or to package them. We have to use a labor program called H-2B in the warehouse, but switching back to the H-2A, what the federal lawmakers could very well do to help the program is to freeze that adverse effect wage rate for at least 2 years and then call on Congress and administration to help reform that program.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the H-2B program, I mean, there's many provisions of it, so we won't unpack the whole thing, no pun intended. But that program has a lot of regulations and restrictions that I think sometimes feel really arbitrary, or they don't align with the actual needs of the industry that's using them.
That's correct. So as I stated, Duckwall uses the H-2B program in our warehouse. And the problem with that is there's 2 filing windows that fall from October to March and April to September, and they don't align with the needs. So for example, our highest need starts with harvest and when we're full capacity packing and producing our fruit. And that starts the August window through October, November, December, and it doesn't align directly with those windows that the Department of Labor mandates upon us. And it doesn't correlate with business need, and I'm sure we're not the only business that doesn't correlate with.
Sure, it seems like some flexibility there, both to help the businesses, but importantly the workers, if they fall outside of the filing window.
Correct.
I mean, if the potential job opportunity falls outside the filing window, that's a lost opportunity for them as well as for you.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So switching from federal to more state and local, what are some ways that state leaders, local leaders could help? What are some things they have done that have either made doing business easier or more difficult for you and your growers? And what do you want our listeners to know about the more local and state policy landscape?
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, there's nothing easy about doing business in Oregon. I mean, that's frank, but it is in fact true. As a state, we have regulated business at an extraordinarily fast rate, above the national norm. And the statement of we're seventh most regulated state in the U.S. doesn't fall on deaf ears here. We know that, we see that, our growers see that. It is very challenging. And also the fact that over 40% of these regulations can be classified as redundant or burdensome, that also is a statement that business is hearing, feeling on an everyday basis when they're trying to operate and just do the best they can to survive.
Yeah, and you, some might consider Duckwall a big company by some measures. I don't know, that you guys would consider that, but it feels like that has turned into a more subjective sense that people have. But your growers, a lot of them are small businesses. You guys are still small to mid-sized business by statistical, purposes, even if your name is big in Oregon. That has to make that regulatory compliance even more difficult. You both wear multiple hats. Everyone here, I think, probably wears multiple hats. It's not like you have someone who can manage every single regulation as a full-time job. But how do you work through that? How do you try to manage that?
Here at Duckwall Fruit, we do have a HR and people staff, which is wonderful. But our growers' plight is much more severe when they are operating on their own or with one employee as to help them through all these nuanced and redundant regulations. And Ed alluded to it earlier, we are seeing mass consolidation in our grower base, and this is a direct result of what Oregon is doing as a state in its regulatory environment. And it truly, frankly, hurts our small family businesses and our small family farms.
Yeah, I mean, just I want to add to what Sarah's saying. She's, hit the nail on the head. And the reason of consolidation, the reason we're all getting bigger is because the ability to turn a profit is dwindling quickly. And, I think there is a false narrative that we can just raise prices. We don't produce something that has a, long and stable shelf life. We're really price takers, and we don't live in a bubble. We live and compete with fruits not only locally but nationally and globally. We deal with changing currency valuations. So the more burdensome and the more costly it is to grow that pear that everybody loves and enjoys, it's just that much harder every day to turn a profit, and that's why you're seeing consolidation. And I think it's really sad because our company was founded as my great-grandfather started the company and as a grower and a company, and that family feeling, while still alive in the pear industry, is slowly eroding. And I'm not sure a lot of people would be happy to hear that small family farms are going by the wayside and that we're all getting bigger.
Yeah, and we get into this with folks in a lot of different industries, and it saddens us too, in part because there's this irony here that would be actually pretty easy to fix if people would sort of pay attention to it when they're in policymaking roles, which is so many people will stand up and say they want to defend family farmers and small growers and small businesses, and sometimes they will even be openly hostile to bigger businesses or out-of-state companies or whatever. But they'll want to support the small business and say that and say all the right things, and then the very policies they vote for or support through agency rulemaking, or let's stand after agency rulemaking, are the very policies that are creating the environment that drives those businesses to close or sell or consolidate. And it seems so obvious to some of us that watch it. What do you, we've talked about several issues that I asked specifically about, but what do you wish policymakers understood about your business, your industry, those people you do business with, that we haven't covered?
Angela, Oregon businesses, for the most part, are good actors, and we do our part every day at Duckwall Fruit, our growers, certainly most businesses in Oregon, to make a positive difference in our community and state. And we treat our employees fairly and with integrity and respect. And if we all started from that premise every day when we went in to make a policy, we would be far and above a better state. I truly believe that if we understood that piece alone, or at least felt that we're all trying to do our best every day for our employees, for our stakeholders, and that we show up to make a difference, and we're not out here to hurt anybody, then I think we would be better.
Yeah, we agree. We got to flip the presumption.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Ed?
I think Sara covered it perfectly. It is quite maybe infuriating is a little strong word, but to always hear that and hear the narrative that business is the bad guy is really just not the case. And as Sara said, this is our family. We try to treat them with respect, and we have employees that have been here for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
I don't think we have 40-year employees because we're bad actors. So, piling on regulation to make us something different just seems wrong to me.
Yeah, heard for sure.
And Angela, just one more point. I'd really love for policymakers to focus on enforcement versus trying to fix it in another avenue. I think that also would be extremely helpful to everyone in Oregon.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how we need to think about carrots maybe more instead of sticks. Sticks are sometimes appropriate and necessary because there are bad actors, but you can't legislate your way around them. Bad actors are bad actors. None of us have any use for them.
Correct.
So let's think about how we can, again, flip that presumption, think about carrots instead of sticks to make it easier for the vast majority of people who are good actors, make it easier for you to do more and grow and thrive for you and your employees, stakeholders, partners, etc.
We'll just say it feels more like a bat currently than it does a stick.
All right, that's fair. That is fair. Okay, so last question, hardest one of the day. What is your favorite way to enjoy a Duckwall pear?
That is a good question, Angela. And I've been eating pears my whole life. And I think about this because everyone asks this, and I always will go back to a ripe pear, sweet, juicy, and sliced, and often with a slice of cheddar cheese. It is hard to beat. And if you get that pear in that moment, you will be a pear lover for life.
Excellent.
I would agree with Sara. That is my favorite way to enjoy a pear. But pears are incredibly versatile. They don't all have to be soft. They don't all turn color. There's a plethora of ways to enjoy those. And, crisp in a salad is another way that I enjoy pears, but poached and or baked are also equally as delicious. So I don't think there's one perfect way to enjoy a pear. Just buy more of them and go down the journey.
And there he is, the sales guy is always on duty. I would agree with that. I don't think I've ever been served a pear in a way that didn't make sense and tastes delicious. So that's not a challenge to my culinary inclined family members. So thank you both very much. I really enjoy this conversation. I love coming out here. It's beautiful. It's great to see your facility and what you guys are doing. Is there anything you want to share before we wrap it up?
Angela, we just appreciate the opportunity to highlight Duckwall Fruit and the ag industry, and we truly do hope to be in business for family generations yet to come. I get to walk the same stairs as my ancestors every day, and that is definitely more than a job.
I couldn't agree more. Again, I was drawn to this business because of the family nature and the passion that I saw my grandfather and Sara's brother, Fred, for years pour their life into, and caring about the people and the growers. And it is more than a job, and I'm excited about future generations of family to run this wonderful company in this wonderful valley, selling the best pears in the world.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you both, Sara Duckwall and Ed Weathers, for joining us today on the Oregon Business Matters podcast. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Our podcast is a production of OBI, Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber. Our episodes can be found on all of the top podcast platforms, or of course on our website, OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.